Let's be honest, navigating communication with caregivers in special education is not always easy. This has been a topic that has been requested, and I am going to attempt to share some solutions based on my own experience. But before we dive in, I want to make something very clear. This episode is all about finding positive solutions, and it's focused on improving communication with families and caregivers, especially when things get tough. But let me say this, no one, including you as an educator, should ever tolerate mistreatment or inappropriate behavior. So while we're going to be focusing in on empathy and professionalism and assuming positive intent, this is not about condoning disrespectful or hurtful interactions. Your role as a teacher is incredibly important, and you deserve to be treated with the same respect you're giving to others. Hey, special educators, I'm Jennifer from Positively Learning. Welcome to the Special Educators Resource Room. If you're like me, you're always looking for ways to save time and streamline your work. That's why this podcast was created, to give you the systems and solutions you need to get your time back. Tune in for tips, tricks, and tools that will help you manage your workload and make the most of your time. Whether you're brand new or experienced, all are welcome in the Special Educators Resource Room. Picture this. You're at school and it feels like you're juggling a million things. Behavior plans, lesson plans, progress monitoring, and you're on your way to a PLC. And right when you think you're starting to see some balance, a conversation with a parent throws you off your game. You are not alone, and you're not doing this wrong. This work is really hard, but there's some good news. The fact that you're here listening to this episode tells me that you are committed to building those connections with families. So we're going to be talking about some common scenarios that you might face, whether it's during an IEP meeting, in day-to-day communication, or whenever emotions run high. This episode is filled with practical strategies to help you navigate these moments. Before we get started with some strategies and solutions, I want to give you some information about my background and where I'm coming from. Number one, I'm old. I have a lot of experience, but I still clearly remember that feeling when I was younger. I struggled with imposter syndrome. This meant that even though I knew, what was right and what I wanted to say and to advocate, I struggled with getting intimidated really easily in conversations, and it took a lot of work and just a lot of time to get over that. And I did get over that. Now I have much more confidence. I speak on a podcast. If you would have told me I was going to do that, I would have said that you were crazy. Another thing to know is I don't really like surprises, even good ones. If you're close to me in real life, you probably would not surprise me with spontaneous travel plans. It just would not go as you hoped. I feel the same way about interactions at school. So I have a lot of proactive strategies that help me feel more comfortable, but I also think it is a sign of respect to everyone involved, so everyone knows what's going on and we're on the same page. And one more thing, I do not struggle with setting boundaries because I truly believe the boundaries that I put into place are in everyone's best interest. And they don't have to be so serious. For example, one boundary that I have is that I do not have important conversations in the evening if I can help it. I don't even make sense in the evenings. I am a morning person. I love my coffee, and a conversation we have in the evening could be very different than the conversation we'd have when I am fresh. So I like things to go to voicemail so that I can process it, and then I am ready to have a productive conversation the next day. You may be nodding your head agreeing with this, or you might be completely opposite, and that's okay. It's all about finding your own boundaries and your own communication style. Keep that in mind as we dive into these scenarios. Number one, the family member with a long list of requests. Maybe it's in an IEP meeting and a caregiver shows up with this long list of requests. Maybe they feel like demands, but it's a list of requests for goals and services and accommodations and you name it. It feels very overwhelming. And you might be thinking, how in the world are we supposed to make this work? The first thing I suggest doing is taking a deep breath. That list is a sign. It's a sign that this family member is engaged and invested, and they took the time to prepare for this meeting. So we're going to start with gratitude. Thank you so much for sharing this. It's clear how much thought you've put into this. And then find common ground. Highlight the requests that do align with what you're seeing, with the IEP goals, and explain how they fit into the plan. And use data to guide the conversation. Here's what we've seen in Jennifer's progress, and this is how we can build on that. Now, there's going to be requests that might not feel possible. So instead of thinking of that long list of demands, think about what purpose they serve. What need are we looking for a solution for? And it's okay to say, let's explore alternative ways to address that need. The key here is you're having a conversation and that you and this caregiver want the same thing. This next scenario could easily overlap with the first one, and it's when emotions run high. So let's say we're in a meeting and someone is crying, or the frustration has just come to the surface. These moments can feel really heavy for everyone, but they're also an opportunity to show empathy and to build trust. So here's some ideas to approach this. Number one, of course, we're going to acknowledge their feelings. I can see how much you care. I know this process can feel overwhelming. A quick side note, this process can feel overwhelming because it is, or it might feel overwhelming for something completely unrelated. I will never forget a relationship that I had with a caregiver. It went on for a few years, and it was not an easy one. It often felt very frustrating and unproductive. But there was one meeting where she had brought a large bag, and she was looking inside the bag for something, I think like a piece of paper to show us. And she was taking things out of her bag, and it was unbelievable. It was bills and bills, like letters from the mail, and then prescription bottles and prescription wrappers, like the kind you get when you walk out of the pharmacy with it. And it was so much was coming out of her bag. And I was overwhelmed. And it completely just was like a light bulb moment for me. And this person was not old. She was early 20s, and she was dealing with us, the school. She was dealing with prescriptions and bills and parenting and just whatever else was going on. It really changed my perspective that this was somebody who was overwhelmed. And we were probably a very safe place to take that frustration out. It just changed my entire perspective when I saw that. So back to the meeting. If emotions are running high, of course, we're going to acknowledge the feelings, but we also can offer a break. Sometimes a few minutes, just a pause, can completely shift the tone. We also want to refocus on the things that we can do. Let's talk about these next steps we can take together to make sure Jennifer gets the support that she needs. So we're going to validate their emotions. We're also going to bring this conversation back to the shared goals so that the family member can feel heard and feel supported, and it's a safe place. I know that's all much easier said than done. Scenario number 3, a family member doesn't respond or misses meetings. So sometimes the challenge isn't too much communication, it's not enough. And maybe you're getting ghosted and the family member is not responding to your emails, or they're just consistently not showing up. Here's how we're going to approach this. We're going to assume positive intent. Life happens. They might be juggling a lot of work schedules and health issues, or simply feeling overwhelmed. We are going to use multiple communication methods. If the phone call's not working, we can try email or a text or the school messaging app. And we are going to offer flexibility. For example, I know it's hard to find the time. Would it help to meet virtually or chat at a different time? The goal is we're not going to add our emotion to it. We're going to make the process as accessible as possible, But we're also going to stay consistent and we're going to document these attempts. That way you are covered if anyone questions your communication efforts. I remember one family we worked with, I'm not sure if they ever attended a meeting, signed a paper, or returned a phone call. But if a sweatshirt got left out at recess and didn't get sent home, we were going to hear about it. And I remember thinking, this just doesn't make sense. But then I thought, this is not for me to add emotion to. I can set boundaries here and just do what I can do. I know this podcast episode's getting long. I have 2 more scenarios to go. This next one is probably the one that we fear the most, but we really should not fear it. This scenario is when a caregiver disagrees with the team's recommendations. Maybe it's a huge pushback or a simple, I do not agree. Either way, situation can feel uncomfortable, but it is really an opportunity to build trust. When I've experienced this, I found that the pushback usually fell into one of these 2 buckets. The first is, we didn't do a great job explaining our reasoning, and this family member didn't understand what we were doing. Or we were missing something. There was a concern that wasn't being addressed, and we need to learn more about that. So here's how I suggest navigating this. Number 1, listen actively. You could say, I want to understand your concerns. Can you share more about what you're feeling? And then we can explain our reasoning using data, using examples. Here's why we're recommending this. It's based on what we've seen here and here. We want to collaborate on the next steps. Our goal is not to win the conversation. It's to keep the communication open and work towards a plan that everyone's on board with. So maybe it looks like, how about we trial this approach for 6 weeks and then check in to see how it's working? I think the tough thing here is when this comes as a surprise. Remember earlier I said there are no surprises at the IEP meeting table? That came from my own experience. There was a caregiver who liked to use the element of surprise to have her voice heard. It was not the easiest thing to experience. But when you think about it, how did she learn that that worked? Probably from being dismissed at previous meetings. And she knew that if she dropped a bomb when she had everybody's attention, things were going to happen for her child. Now I'm working with her and I know of this background, and the way my nerves are set up, it's not a great match. I need to find a solution. So I took a proactive approach. I discovered her preferred method of communication, which was face-to-face. And I made a point of seeing her as often as possible at dismissal. I would always greet her. How are you? How are you feeling? How do you feel things are going? And we developed a really nice relationship. And I'm happy to say we had great meetings. We never had surprises at our meetings. And I can thank her because I kept that proactive approach for families I worked from that point forward. Let's finish up this long podcast episode with a big one: managing boundaries. Those late night emails, surprise phone calls, family members asking for time you simply do not have. It's a lot, and it's okay to feel overwhelmed. Let's start by reframing our definition of boundaries. Boundaries are not just about protecting your time. They're about setting clear expectations and letting everyone know how this communication is going to go so we can all get on the same page. Think about the scenarios we talked about. How many could have been avoided with better communication, or at least kept from escalating? So here's some ideas. Be proactive. At the start of the school year or today, you can let people know your availability. You can say, I check emails at 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. and I respond within 36 hours. Now you might be thinking, that's impossible. I'm getting emailed all the time. I cannot wait 36 hours. But you know what? If you did not have that expectation and you did not respond, I could see some frustration building. I'd be hitting refresh, waiting for your response. And by hour 36, I'd be pretty fired up. But if I knew it was going to be 36 hours, I would have walked away from my inbox, gotten on with my day, and I would definitely not be feeling frustrated because you communicated when you were going to respond. And please stick to your plan. If you get an email at 10 p.m., please do not respond until the next school day. Now, if this doesn't feel comfortable for you yet, you could offer other proactive systems. Maybe you send out weekly updates or you share progress trackers, something that could minimize that need for someone to be constantly checking in with you. Now, this is going to sound really cheesy, but boundaries, they're not about saying no. They're about saying yes to showing up fully for your students and for yourself. As we wrap up, I want to leave you with one last thought. Improving communication with families is about trust, but that doesn't mean tolerating mistreatment. If you ever find yourself in a situation where boundaries are crossed, know that it's okay and necessary to stand firm and seek support. Thank you for all that you do. I appreciate you. I'll catch you next time in the Special Educators Resource Room. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'm dying to ask, what'd you think? Be sure to hit the follow or subscribe buttons so that you never miss an episode. You can find the show notes and links for everything mentioned in this episode at positivelylearningblog.com. See you next week for more special education solutions.